how can you take a mini retirement if you're afraid about being laid off?
I always encourage people, if you like your job, if you want to keep your job, negotiate this off first. You have to kind of craft that mini retirement story. How are you going to present the idea? If possible, to include these 4 elements. 1, make it positive. Like, don't make it a negative thing. Like, I'm so tired of y'all. I can't look at your guys' faces for a minute longer. Like, make it a positive thing. Pick something that's interesting. Not just like, oh, I want to go home. Like, I want to watch Netflix. I just need to chill out. Like, do something interesting. Ideally, make it specific. So instead of, I just want more time with my kids, pick a specific thing that you're going to do with your kids. Like, I did a 10-week road trip to 10 national parks with my kiddos in a pop-up camper. It's a very specific thing. And then the 4th thing is make it something that's a one-time event. Maybe it's around an anniversary or a specific kind of activity. Like, you're going to hike the Camino. That takes a month. But most people don't hike the Camino every year. It's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing.
Hey everyone, welcome to Her Money. I'm Jean Chatzky. Thank you so much for being with us today. Let me ask you all a question. Have you ever thought about walking away from your job, even just for a little bit, but then stopped yourself because you got bills to pay, you've got a career that you've worked hard for. You're not exactly sure what taking this kind of a break would actually mean for your future. Yeah, if you've done that, this episode is for you, because today we are diving into a radically freeing idea. What if we didn't retire once at 65 or 68 or 70, but instead took mini retirements throughout our lives, breaks that are actually intentional, they're planned, they're financially viable, and believe it or not, they can even be career enhancing. My guest this week has not only made it work, she's made it a lifestyle. Jillian Johnsrud is the author of the new book, Retire Often: How Anyone Can Take Multiple Career Breaks to Unlock Adventure, Advance Their Career, and Find Financial Freedom. And she's not just talking about it. By 40, Jillian and her husband had taken more than a dozen mini retirements while raising 6 kids. Yeah, that's not a typo. Traveling the world, investing in real estate, living abroad, road tripping in the U.S., and still building meaningful careers. Jillian, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to start with the idea at the heart of your book. Why retire once when you can retire often? Where'd that come from for you?
Yeah. I never thought I would be able to retire early. We didn't go into hiring professions, so that seemed kind of unrealistic. I assumed I would retire at 65 or 70, but there were these other things I really wanted to do, these other goals and dreams that might not fit alongside the 9 to 5, and I knew I would need time for them. So taking these mini retirements or career breaks or sabbaticals, whatever you want to call them, seemed like the most reasonable solution to that problem, to that goal.
How is a mini retirement different than just taking time off?
I think it depends on the amount of time and the intention. So I describe a mini retirement as a month or longer. So it's not a week. A week should be a vacation. Stepping away from your 9 to 5. And then the third one, to focus on something that matters to you. So I think having that meaningfulness and that intention is what separates it from, you might get laid off and it might take you a month to find a new job, but you're kind of like lounging around the house and feeling discouraged and watching Netflix. Where a mini retirement, you're going to focus on doing something that matters.
What is it with the month or longer?
I find that's kind of the minimum effective dose to really unplug, to really be more present, and just start to relax, to start to mentally disconnect from work. And if you have some burnout, it's about the amount of time you need to really start to kind of get your head above water again. And it's enough time to do something really cool. You can have an amazing adventure or accomplish something significant in a month.
I can see what you mean. I mean, it takes me, when I go on vacation, I try, if I can, to at least do 2 weeks, because the first week is a bit of a wash, right?
Yeah.
It takes me that first week to just breathe out all the emails and other things that I'm trying to unthink. And then it takes a little while to just settle into whatever it is you happen to be doing. As I said in the intro, you've taken over a dozen mini retirements with your husband while raising 6 kids, which sounds logistically really intense. But
Yeah.
I do want to acknowledge the financial foundation for your family that made this possible. A military pension, rental properties, and investments that helped you become financially independent by the age of 32. For most people listening, that kind of a head start just is not realistic. So, can you break down for us how someone without those advantages, someone earning an average salary, still paying student loans, figuring out health insurance that they absolutely have to have, could realistically structure this for themselves?
Yeah, a number of our mini retirements happened before all of that. And a couple of them, like we took 2, which allowed us to invest in real estate, which is one of the ways that a mini retirement can have a lot of different functions. It can be on the personal side, time with people you love, recovering from burnout, adventure, but it can be financial. We took a month off and we actually bought the house that we live in now as a rental property. We purchased it, we renovated it, we got it rented in a month, and then went back to work. And now that was 10 years ago, it's significantly appreciated. So that month off, while it did have a cost, also was a huge financial advantage and boost for us. But they don't have to be expensive. I did one in my 20s where me and my best friend did a road trip from DC to Seattle and back in a month in my green Honda Civic. And like we slept on friends' couches and we stayed with family and we camped and we almost got trampled by bison. Like it was an amazing trip, but it doesn't have to be super expensive. Or even last year, I took a month off in the process of writing this book to study tango for a month because I just started tango and I was like obsessed with it. I loved it so much. I took a month off just to practice, but I gave myself $1,000 budget for the lessons, for the shoes, for the classes, and it was so enjoyable. So you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money for it to be meaningful.
You actually put a figure in the sand. You said if you can save an extra 6.5%, that can fund a lifetime of breaks. Can you walk me through that math?
Yes. So 6.5%, this is kind of like the most outrageous, idealistic version. And that would equate to taking a month off every other year. So you might end up with 20 mini retirements in your lifetime. So it's a lot. And it's assuming that you get zero compensation or you have no additional income during that month off. Every single month off is entirely unpaid. And the kind of target I encourage people to shoot for with their budget, if they just don't know where to start, is 50% of whatever your take-home pay is. So if you bring home $5,000 a month, you can spend an extra $2,500 for your mini retirement. If you bring home $10,000 a month, you can spend an extra $5,000 for your mini retirement because that kind of keeps it tethered to your typical lifestyle. So maybe early in your career, you're bringing home $5,000 and your budget's smaller, but maybe later in your career, you're bringing home $20,000 a month and you get a $10,000 budget. So your mini retirements kind of scale with your income and your lifestyle. But that would cover 6.5% would cover your full take-home pay for that month off, plus your additional 50% for your adventure budget for a month every other year. And I encourage people, in the book I talk about, like, find the thing that's high leverage for you. For some people, that's earning more money. For some people, that's reducing expenses. But that 6.5% it's not a huge amount of money. If you're bringing home 5,000-6,000, we're talking about $300 or $400 a month. And this isn't so you can, pay your water bill when you're 70. this is for something that's going to happen really soon. So you might be like, okay, so I'm going to trade like my Chipotle burrito bowl that I have every Friday at lunch because next year I'm going to be eating street tacos in Mexico. Like I'm not depriving myself. I'm just pushing that kind of luxury I want slightly in the future and hopefully a massive upgrade.
And so you're doing this, putting aside this 6.5% fund while you're saving for your 401k, while you're paying your rent, while you're doing all of those other things. You've laid out a couple of sample budgets here for people at different stages of their careers. Could you take us through one with an example or two of what it might cover?
Yeah. So this is kind of maybe the most you would want to spend. And I always want to encourage people, if you want to do something more affordable, there's a lot of ways to kind of hack this. So I'll use an example. My family and I last year or 2 years ago did a road trip from Montana down to Florida and back. And we did Disney and we did Washington, D.C. and kind of the whole thing. But we rented our house out because we were going to be gone for 6 months. We rented our house out while we traveled. And we realized that it actually cost us about the same amount to travel basically full time as it does to live at home. So that additional 50%, we actually, other than our tickets to Disney, which did not fall into that, Disney tickets were definitely separate, our costs were about the same. And this is possible even if you're renting a place, but you want to go to Italy for a month to do a cooking class. You could sublet your house. You could Airbnb your place for a month to offset that cost. So I think finding the budget that works for you. And in the book, I encourage, if you've got a bucket list of 20 different things, start with the more affordable ones. Front load the affordable experiences now so that as your financial freedom grows, you can afford the more expensive ones. And there is a little bit of a correlation. Sometimes the younger we are, the adventures that might sound interesting and palatable at 45 might sound less interesting at 70. So you kind of get the advantage of doing maybe the more rugged or adventurous things that might be more affordable when you have less disposable income. And savings, you can save the around the world cruise when you're 75. Like 75-year-olds love to go cruising.
I'm not couch surfing in my 70s. I'm just saying.
No.
Let's talk about the tactical process of saving this money. Do you recommend a separate account? Do you recommend a sinking fund? Saving is hard for people. I mean, we have lots of things, including that Chipotle bowl that we want every Friday that are just calling to us on a regular basis. So how do you make sure that the savings goal actually gets satisfied?
Yeah. So once you've kind of picked what that meaningful thing that you're going to do is, and for a lot of people it is travel, but it can be something at home. One year I built a food forest in my backyard and just landscaped.
You built a
summer.
What?
A food forest. It's like a massive garden except perennials that make food. So like fruit trees and fruit bushes and herbs and strawberries, and it's a jungle back there. My kids love it because I've got like a million kids. So I just send them out and say, go eat your snacks. Like all the snacks are in the backyard, but you can do stuff at home. So what I encourage people to do after you pick this kind of adventure, whatever that is, come up with almost like an a la carte price list. What are all the different components going to cost? If you're going to go to live in France for a month, what are my airline tickets? What's my Airbnb? How much does it cost to go to the Louvre? Just make a little Google sheet if you're kind of geeky like me. But the advantage is that as you're making those choices, like maybe it's a big choice. I want to do this forever. And you're looking at buying a new car and you're like, do I do the $600 car payment or do I go cheaper and do the $400 car payment? You're like, oh shoot, that $200 a month, like that would get me a lot closer. If I only need to save $400 a month, like that one choice makes this mini retirement thing really possible. But maybe it's smaller choices. Like you're like, I could do dog sitting. That would bring in $300. But then you look at this price list and you're like, oh man, $300, that's a lot of street tacos. I can buy a lot of street tacos for $300. And so transferring that money, I think, into a high yield savings account, into a separate account, but you can kind of cross it off of this price list because you're not just saving, okay, I need $4,000 for this goal, or I need $6,000. You're saying, okay, if I don't go out for drinks tonight, I save that $30. Actually, that $30 buys a really nice lunch in Paris. Maybe instead of this thing, I want that thing. And you just kind of mentally, yeah, I'm going to skip this, but I'm not depriving myself. I'm just choosing the thing I want more, which is the lunch in Paris.
So, rental properties, Jillian, I know that a lot of people are curious. How did you get started with this? Do you think it's still possible in this real estate market to get started with this? How much money do you need to get going? And the idea that you renovated a house in a month, to me, is astonishing. So talk about that too.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people who do real estate, and I won't claim to be the real estate expert by any means. There are smarter people than me on this topic. But I know a lot of people who are still buying properties and still making money. Like with anything, I think you have to know your market and you have to research it and you have to know your numbers. For us, the role that mini retirements played was, it was something I had been really interested in. I'd read all the books. I'd been thinking about it and researching it for a long time. But it's really tough, at least for us with all of our kids. It was really tough to do alongside 9 to 5 jobs and all of our family commitments, because you can do a lot of stuff. You can read the books and research and maybe go to some open houses. But when it comes to that big push of, we're going to buy the property and all the loan signing and all of those things, and do any renovations that you need to do to get it up to speed and find renters, it is a big time commitment. And if you have to hire all of that out, for some people, then the numbers don't work. There's not enough margin to do that. So just even having for us a month to finish all of that up and to give it, we had 8-10 hours a day that we could get through all of those logistics, made it was the difference between doing that and not doing it. And for context, we only bought 2 rentals, which it's not like we were building a whole empire, but they both cash flowed well enough that it made a significant difference. At first, they were $1,000 a month, and then eventually $1,500 a month after all expenses cash flow, which isn't $10,000 a month. It's not enough to live on. But in the context of mini retirements, $1,000 a month, that means every year you have an extra $12,000 to take mini retirements, which is an enormous budget. And so sometimes it can feel like, gosh, that's a lot of hassle for like $400 a month or $1,000 a month, whether it's a side hustle or real estate. But if you think of how much that is over 2 years, and you want to take a month-long mini retirement every 2 years, that $500 a month, well, that's $12,000 every 2 years. That's an enormous budget, and that could fully fund this kind of different lifestyle where you get to have these small breaks and you don't have to save everything until you're 65 or 70.
If you are in a job right now, I would say that with this labor market starting to waver, chances are pretty good you may want to hold on to that job. I want to ask you 2 different questions here. The first is, how can you take a mini retirement if you're afraid about being laid off? And the second is, if you're laid off, can you turn that into a mini retirement?
Yes. Yes to both. So if you're worried about being laid off, I always encourage people, if you like your job, if you want to keep your job, negotiate this off first. Like, that is your first step, is just to try to negotiate a month off, which I know can sound kind of scary and unusual. You're like, yeah, that's not really my company. Like, they don't really do that. They don't have that program. It's not something they typically offer. But I have found people have tremendous success if you put a little bit of thought and effort into those conversations. So I always encourage people, first you have to kind of craft that mini retirement story. How are you going to present the idea? And if possible, to include these 4 elements. 1, make it positive. Don't make it a negative thing. I'm so tired of y'all. I can't look at your guys' faces for a minute longer. Like, make it a positive thing. Pick something that's interesting. Not just like, oh, I want to go home. Like, I want to watch Netflix. I just need to chill out. Do something interesting. Ideally, make it specific. So instead of, I just want more time with my kids, pick a specific thing that you're going to do with your kids. I did a 10-week road trip to 10 national parks with my kiddos in a pop-up camper. It's a very specific thing. And then ideally, the 4th thing is make it something that's a one-time event. Something that's not like, this is something I'm going to do every year, but maybe it's around an anniversary or a birthday or a specific kind of activity. Like, you're going to hike the Camino. That takes a month. But most people don't hike the Camino every year. It's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing. So when you put all of these together, you might say, let's say you go to your employer and you're like, hey, so my mom is set to turn 60 this year, and her and my dad had always planned to take a month off to bike through Croatia when they turned 60 and retired. But as you might know, my dad passed away a couple years ago. I would really love to be able to do this trip with her. You know, she's still young and healthy, and it would mean so much, and it would be a great bonding experience. Like, we don't have that much time together. I've got a week of PTO. I would need another 3 weeks. I could take those unpaid, but I would love to be able to go do this, just once in a lifetime experience. And when you frame that story, it has all 4 elements. And then the other thing you bring is, what are the challenges? Like, you have to do kind of the mental logistical work. What are the challenges of you leaving? This cannot be your boss's problem. They have a big enough job.
Right. Absolutely.
So think through all of the challenges, come up with a lot of solutions, and then the trick is articulate those challenges to your boss. They might be hesitant to say those things out loud, but until we can acknowledge the challenges, you can't really get to the solutions. So you've presented this very compelling thing you want to do. They don't want to like burst your bubble and crush your dream. So say, I know you might be concerned about this, or I know this might be a factor. I know this might be a challenge, but whatever you think they're thinking, say it out loud for them. Take on kind of that emotional labor, say it out loud for them so that you can start this collaborative and creative process for figuring out the solutions together.
I love the specificity of all of that, because as a boss, that's exactly where my mind goes, right? Yeah. Somebody wants to go for a month. My mind is, well, we've got 8 newsletters over that month and another 8 podcasts. And how are we going to get all of those things done? And I like that you're willing to put that on the table and help me come to a solution to figure that out. One of the promises that the book makes is that this actually could be good for your career. Yeah. How? As a boss, I don't necessarily think that the person, honestly, who wants to take a month off is the person I'm promoting next.
Yeah. So there's a few different ways. So if we talk first about taking a month off from your current employer, there is a reality of burnout that it reduces our motivation, it reduces our creativity, it reduces like that extra advantage. And I kind of compare it to, especially in some professions where being the best really matters. Like, being average isn't going to help you out. The best disproportionately win at something. And so I kind of compare it to running a race. If you're running like the 400-meter dash, if you could do something for a month that made you 10% faster than everyone, you don't win 10% more races. If you're 10% faster than everyone, you win all the races. And in some professions, it matters. Winning all the races matters. And so there's that element of you come back better. There's another element, especially for, I think disproportionately for women, when they juggle a lot personally, they don't have as much time and bandwidth for extra education, for certifications, for training, to do that alongside their job, alongside all their family commitments. And so taking a month off really can help you focus on these other things that are going to make you more even to your peers when you return. All those things that maybe some of your other coworkers can do that training or that can go to that conference. You can create a little bit more equality in your qualifications in that. And then the third thing is often in between, if you decide to separate from your employer, in between jobs, for most people, your largest chance, your largest ability to get a significant raise or a significant promotion is by switching employers. So if you kind of bake that into your career plan, okay, every 3 years, every 5 years, I'm going to switch employers because I'm going to try to level up. And just be intentional about taking a month off, 3 months off, 4 months off in between these jobs is a mini retirement. You might end up coming back to a much better job. I had a friend who took a year off and he came back and he got a 50% raise, which is amazing. And you're like, that's so cool. And I'm like, that's not cool. Because the reason he got a 50% raise is he had been at his last employer for 15 years. So he had been underpaid for a long time. And he left a lot of money on the table. Because I'm a little bit of a money nerd. Like if we assume he was making 100,000 and he came back at 150, maybe for 8 of those years he had been underpaid. That's $400,000. And even if his mini retirement cost him $100,000 because he took a whole year off, that's $300,000. And at 40, if he could have invested an extra $300,000, shoot, by the time he's 70, what's that, like $1 million? He was $1 million poorer because he didn't take that time off earlier. So it can have a massive impact on your lifetime earning potential.
Last question, 6 kids.
Yeah.
How do you do this with 6 kids?
It is so logistically hard. I mean, many retirements are. And it takes planning and it takes effort and you have to budget. We had to homeschool. We traveled with them. And so we had to figure that out. And they do public school the rest of the time. It's so much logistics. It's a little bit like spring cleaning your house. You got to pull all this stuff out. And it's a little bit messier before it becomes more organized. But the reality is, in the rearview mirror, I remember before we left for that 10-week road trip to 10 national parks, the week, I think most moms feel this, like the few days before vacation are like the worst days. It's so much preparation and it's so much work and you're responsible to finish up so many things. If you're leaving for 10 weeks, it is not easier than leaving for like 5 days. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what have we gotten ourselves into? This is so much work because we're also renting out our house. So it all has to be clean. But the reality is with these kinds of experiences, in the rearview mirror, all of that hassle gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And sometimes you forget that you even felt stressed. But the meaningfulness of that experience, God, when I think about that trip, my kiddos are all, they were all itsy bitsy then. They were like 2 and 5 and 7 and 9. And now they're all teenagers. Like my oldest is about to turn 18. He's 6'4". Like they're all big and I love them, but it's just so different. And I look back at that and I feel so much nostalgia for that trip. And we were hiking in Yosemite and the Grand Canyon and all of these beautiful places. The further away you get, the more meaningful that gets, the more precious that gets. And I've even had people on my podcast totally gaslight me because sometimes these are my one-on-one coaching clients. So I was there. I heard before their mini retirement that they were nervous. I heard their fears. I heard their stress. And then 3 years later, they come on my podcast and I'm like, so is there anything like you were nervous about? And they're like, no, it was really simple. I felt really good about it. And I'm like, liars, I was there. I have the notes. I have the receipts. You had concerns. But 3 years later, they're like, no, it was amazing. It was pretty easy. I felt great about it.
On this podcast, we've got an audience of people that I think are thinking about their real retirement, their final retirement. What are the big lessons that you take from these mini retirements that help you prep for that inevitable retirement at some point in your life?
Yeah, mini retirements are a fantastic preview test run of retirement. You get to not only experience the benefits of retirement, but you get to kind of work out the kinks because sometimes that transition into retirement isn't smooth. It can be a little bumpy, but the more you've practiced, the easier it gets. And I've known a lot of people who've retired early, and it's always funny when people are planning on retiring early. Because I'll say, hey, have you thought about doing a mini retirement? They're like, no. I'm going to work super hard. I'm going to like push through. I've got like 5 more years and then I'm going to retire forever. And to me, it sounds a little bit like someone saying, I really want to run a marathon. I'm super excited about running a marathon. And you're like, so have you ever done like a 5K? And they're like, no. I'm going to sit at my desk. I'm going to work 6 hours a week. But I've listened to some podcasts about running marathons and I've read a couple books about running marathons. So it's going to be awesome. I'm going to be so good at running marathons. It's going to be the best thing ever. And you're like, you don't want to try just a little bit, do a little test run. You can work out some of those kinks. I'll have people be like, well, I find so much purpose and so much identity in my work. And I'm like, that's amazing. But if you're going to retire eventually, should we practice like building out some purpose and meaning outside of work? Or they're like, I'm terrified to draw down my retirement accounts. And I'm like, yeah, valid. But if you're going to do that for 40 years straight, should we practice doing that a little bit? Should we practice maybe that discomfort of not earning money, of not investing just for a month and see how you feel so you can kind of work through that? So that when you do retire, it's just such an easy transition because you've kind of been doing this all along. You've had so many test runs. You figured out your hobbies. You figured out your routine. You figured out how to not fight with your spouse because they're like constantly in your space. Like you worked out the kinks.
Jillian, you've given me a lot to think about as someone who has never taken a mini retirement other than maternity leave, which I've got to tell you does not count. So as you know, it does not count.
But not restful.
Exactly. I think it's a fascinating concept. And I do think that the idea of practicing before you actually retire for a number of reasons sounds like a really, really good idea. Thanks so much for being on today.
Thanks so much for having me.